Hello everybody, welcome back to the latest episode of the Breakdown podcast. I'm joined this week by Umir, who's a professional football scout and analyst, and we're going to be covering all the Premier League games coming up this weekend and some of the England fallout from the most recent international fixture list. And as always, please make sure to subscribe to the Overlap Breakdown YouTube channel and follow us on all streaming platforms to get your podcasts weekly. Right, Umir, how have you been doing? Obviously, you had a week off. Some personal
by the way, Carl,
stuff.
legend of the game. I feel so bad that I missed it.
Yeah.
But, caught up. Really nice episode. Last week, I was super unwell. Wife was unwell. Scheduling issues. Life gets in the way. But you'll know that as much as I do, obviously. Yeah. But with the international break, I think it was good, like a good time to catch up with everything. And I'm healed and recovered. So we've got like a million games to get into, basically. Yeah,
it's a jam-packed episode today. So as mentioned, we're going to touch on all the Premier League games this weekend, but there is some very, very meaty fixtures, and I'm going to start with the half-12, which is going to be the first game back from the international break, which is Spurs West Ham.
Yeah,
this is going to be, in my opinion, a very interesting game for both teams. Obviously, Spurs had the capitulation at Brighton away where they lost 3-2, dropped a 2-0 lead.
Yeah.
Was Spursy a little bit. Obviously, there was that kind of thing. But also, I want to touch on West Ham a little bit because I've not been impressed at all with West Ham this season. And I'm I'm not going to say I'm worried for them. It's a bit of a weird thing to say, but given the money they spent in the window, I think everyone kind of looked at the money spent and was like, oh, this is a really good window for West Ham. But so far, I've not really seen... You know how much of a fan I am of Nicholas Füllkrug.
Exactly.
Huge fan. Loved him in Germany and stuff like that. Loved him in the Euros, great player.
Yeah.
But the money they spent on him just felt like they were just kind of... Like Guirassy was available like in the same window. Obviously,
and they were like this close to Duran, by the way.
Oh, yeah, and that.
Yeah, Duran was there.
Imagine they got in. See, that would have been like a bit different. Yeah. So that is going to lead us on into what we're talking about in this Spurs-West Ham game, because out of the Premier League fixtures, I think this is the game where the two most polar opposite teams are playing against each other.
I was just going to say, in style...
Yeah.
Like, I'm trying to imagine how the game plays out, but the teams are so vastly different. I think they have some of the same strengths. For example, their ability to break in transition. West Ham, in spite of how they've set up, for example, they've still got that individual quality in their players to execute on that. And like, as good as Spurs are in their individuals in trying to marshal some of those counter-attacking threats with their defenders at the back, for example, I think West Ham have the individuals, Kudus, for example, to pose some threat in their movement and also in their physicality in those situations. But given how they've played throughout the season, like the two styles are like incredibly different.
Yeah. And what do you make of Julian Lopetegui? Like, not just at West Ham. Like, I think he was the manager either once or twice when he beat Manchester United in the Europa League or the Champions League. I can't remember, but they were always a tricky game for us when we played them.
Yeah.
But what do you actually make of him as a manager? What do you think? Yeah. Just to give you a little bit of context, only Forest and Everton have had a longer average goalkeeper passing length than West Ham this season, which obviously is showing that maybe they're still going a bit direct like a David Moyes team.
Yeah.
In comparison to that, Spurs are yet to launch a single dead goalkeeper kick this season, which is ridiculous. Like, I don't even know how that's even possible.
No, because even the teams you typically think of being, short, like goalkeeping.
Even
teams.
Against Brighton. Like Brighton, who like always,
But against high lines, if all the opposition are committing their players forward, like it's only logical to hit long. But I suppose they've got like a different philosophy, a different structure, whatever. I would say it doesn't fully make sense not to, but the fact that you do mention that as like a talking point, I do think when you talk about Lopetegui, for example. And with any manager at the beginning, we saw it with Ten Hag. I hate to go back to United all the time, but when you do take over from the prior manager, you've got a team built sort of in their image. You've got the players who represent their sort of style. So, particularly in season one, you're trying to implement your style whilst playing to the strengths of the players that you have. And particularly if you don't get a long, break over the summer, or players are coming back from international tournaments, etc., that teething period is made more difficult. Could you expect more results from West Ham than what they've got so far? I would say absolutely.
Yeah.
I think in that sense, they've still been underwhelming because player by player, they're a brilliant team. They've got massive quality in their squad.
Yeah, I would say the thing is about West Ham is, like you're saying, they tried to go from being a David Moyes team to a Lopetegui team. Even though I think a Lopetegui team isn't too dissimilar. I think he's still for a Spanish manager, he's very pragmatic.
In his pacing, it's probably different.
And I think, but they signed Max Kilman, Todibo, who played the game against Ipswich just before the international break, and he was actually one of the best players.
I thought it was really good,
but he had a bit of a tough start to life. First couple of games were a bit rough, but then he come in and he looked good. So now they're going to have Max Kilman, Todibo, Wan-Bissaka, who I think me and you are both kind of like, he's a bit of an underrated player on the ball. He's not as bad as people have kind of made him out to be. Obviously, we've got good midfielders like Guido Rodriguez. He's a player that played against Manchester United for Betis, and I thought he was really good. We got linked to him a few summers back. Obviously, they've got Kudus on the wings, Somerville on the wings. They've got really good players. I think this is a huge game for West Ham, because I think Spurs only took 1 point from this fixture last year. So they drew 1-1 and they got beat at home, which is this game, by West Ham 2-1, under David Moyes. So I think this is a really big fixture for West Ham in terms of kind of winning over the fans, getting big 3 points on the board. And me and Carl touched on something last weekend on the podcast about basically when managers come in, like Marco Silva is yet to have the statement victory against a big six. Yeah. And I think West Ham always had like a couple of them in the season. Yeah. So I think if Lopetegui is to try and win,
in favour for Manchester City. I always remember if we needed a result, I'd be like, someone's got West Ham. Like our title rivals have got West Ham. And they'd always pull it out of the bag, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Spurs have the highest expected goals in the Premier League, and they have faced the second least amount of shots in the Premier League. So on paper, I think they're expected.
Man City,
unexpected goals difference. Very, very quirky stat, I know, but for context, that is your XG accumulated versus your XG against. They're second in the league. Yeah. And if you were to say to me that based on what you've watched
a lot of people like term that almost, or use those metrics to term it like expected points. Almost,
stuff like that. Yeah. But if you were to say to me, Spurs are the second best team in the league on underlying numbers, I wouldn't say to you, that's ridiculous. This season so far from what I've watched, I think they were so unlucky in the Leicester game, so unlucky in the Newcastle game. The Brighton game is just a freak Spursy, the type of DNA. But I'm a massive fan of Ange Postecoglou. I know there's some fans out there who are really like sceptical about him and stuff. I love that as a neutral. I've always said this, said it last week. They are the most entertaining team in the league to watch. If Spurs are playing on a weekend, I will watch Spurs. Yeah. And honestly, I just think they're amazing to watch in terms of attacking.
Just a quick mention, I think Slot's Liverpool are pushing, just from an entertainment perspective.
Which actually is a brilliant segue. So, it is. We are going to move on to Liverpool-Chelsea, which we're going to do a separate special episode on this, on the tactics board behind me. In a couple of days' time, we're going to be covering all things Liverpool-Chelsea. We're going to talk about the key tactical battles, statistical outliers, stuff like that, individual players who have maybe done better under certain managers, stuff like that. But really look out for that in a couple of days' time. We are going to touch on it here briefly, but we want to make sure that we save all the juicy information just further down the line, because this is going to be something... It
requires a proper, in-depth kind of thing.
This game, I think, is going to be amazing. I'm really happy. Maresca, Slot, two new managers that have never played against each other. Arne Slot's yet to play a team inside the top 10.
I think Forest is his best.
Forest is the best team he's played on paper, who are 10th. But it's even red and blue. Look at that. You see what I mean? It's great. Proper, But 4 of the last 5, I think, of this fixture have been draws. And I'm not sure if you remember, but do you remember when there was like 3 back-to-back 0-0s and it was Thomas Tuchel and stuff? And I think Mudryk made his debut at Anfield and everyone was like...
But he's unreal in that game.
Do you remember that?
Yeah, genuinely unreal in that game.
Yeah. But this is... What do you think... Obviously, say the juicy tactical stuff that we're going to get onto, but what do you think about this game, and what do you more importantly think is going to be the main talking point of this game? They're both possession-based teams, both high-pressing teams. What do you think is going to be the definitive tactic in the game?
I think it's interesting because what we've seen from Maresca's team, and we've not necessarily, I suppose people didn't suspect it, prior to him joining, is the ability to be fluid in his setups. He's built with 4 at the back. He's built with sort of 2 central defenders, 3 in the middle, sometimes 3 at the back, 3 in the middle. So he's shown a lot of fluidity in how he's built up, and he's also shown sort of fluidity in, trying to apply pressure high up the field and retain the ball up the field versus playing in behind quickly and trying to attack the back line, for example, against Brighton. Now, against Liverpool, I think Chelsea's strengths come from attacking the last line with players like Cole Palmer, Jackson, etc. I think when you've got a team that have Van Dijk, Konate...
It's going to be tough.
Yeah, even without Alisson, Kelleher has got that quality to sweep
Robertson
behind.
as well. I know physically he's a bit suspect now, but he's still got like a good engine.
Compared to general Premier League players. So when you're playing against those two in that fashion, I think, look, they'll try and play in those areas, but it's difficult. So then they've got to have that challenge of can they find solutions in the midfield? What we've seen from Chelsea and what they've done well is show a lot of sort of numbers in midfield, and they can get enough of the ball up the field to pen teams in. Now, what can they do after that? I don't know if they'll have the solutions entirely.
It's like pierce or block, but they can get there, and that's the key thing. I think that's what I noticed when I was watching Chelsea. I think Chelsea have got traditionally, like as a assistant of Pep Guardiola. Obviously, I thought he was really strict in the way he played. At Leicester, I thought he was sort of similar. I thought this about Ange Postecoglou as well when he moved from Spurs. So when he moved to Spurs. When I watched Celtic under Ange, there wasn't really too much rotations with the left back and the midfielders going up and down, kind of doing that with each other. But I thought the same about Maresca, so I watched a lot of Maresca's team, and it was very rare, in my opinion, that I seen Kieran Dewsbury-Hall and Wilfred Ndidi kind of pulling wide and like dropping in. But now I'm seeing Cole Palmer play right centre midfield. But then I'm also seeing him pick the ball up, similar to what he did under Poch, in really deep and wide areas.
I think that's almost a meta tactic, though. We'll get into it
we'll get into it. But that freedom within a structure, I think Thomas Tuchel speaks a lot about freedom within a structure, and I think Enzo Maresca has been I thought out of everything that Pochettino was doing at Chelsea, the one thing that he did really well was give Cole Palmer freedom. But I somehow think Maresca's doing it better because he's giving him runners around him. So he's got Noni Madueke on the right-hand side. He's inverting Gusto now. And he there in that right centre midfield spot is just like the freedom he has to just do everything there. I know you've touched on the Cole Palmer freedom versus the likes of other players, but I think that right centre midfield position, but also being able to pull wide and come into, like, he plays 10 sometimes, he can play on the right wing, he drops into right back, he can play 6. He's just like...
You want your best players getting a lot of touches.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Well, basically.
I think he's a confidence player. You can tell that. Like, he tries things in games. So I think both Pochettino and Maresca have kind of figured out that if we get him, I reckon if you looked at Cole Palmer's touches compared to some other attacking midfielders and wingers, I think his touches will be so high.
100%.
But I think a lot of people are basically giving Cole Palmer credit, and obviously he deserves massive credit for doing what he's doing. But I think Maresca has kind of come into it, looked at his best player and gone, how do we get the best out of him?
I made a similar point, because obviously I think online people would debate either way. I made a similar point in the sense that, like I said, obviously in the sort of pre-season games and the couple of games before Cole Palmer left, played on the right wing, but the last few games he played in the league under Guardiola at Manchester City, he was playing on the left wing. Now, if you put Cole Palmer as a touchline left winger, as good as he was in those games, and he was brilliant, there was a game against Chelsea, he got the better of Azpilicueta, who's, one of the all-time greats in his position. But look, there's a limited amount of influence that you can impart on the team playing as a touchline left winger. Now you get him getting numerous touches in the middle of the pitch where there's space, ability to carry the ball, ability to take shots from that central area. You're not just part of a cog. You're not just a cog in a sort of a bigger team. And by the way, I'm not saying it didn't work. It really did work for Manchester City at the time. But for an individual to show their quality, to be receiving plaudits at the level that Cole Palmer is receiving, you almost need the ability to showcase your quality. And we've seen it from players in the 2000s, for example. Like, I'm not saying Cole Palmer is of this level, but players like Ronaldinho, Zinedine Zidane, with the way that football was at the time, with the greater space that they had, with the more focus on individual players, the ability to showcase that quality is what brings about those plaudits, those numbers, those performances. And Cole Palmer's been platformed in that way, rightly so, to showcase that quality. But if you compare him to someone like Saka, for example, who plays a fairly strict role on that right-hand side, look, if he was to play in the middle, for example, he might be able to chip in with more goals than he does. And that's not to say, look, Saka and Palmer, one's better than the other, but one's being used in a strict way and one's being used in in a free away. The free away benefits the individual and the team because the team's probably not best set up in their other positions. For Saka, because the team is so good around him, he can play in a specific role, facilitate the team, but maybe perhaps to slight detriment to his individual numbers. And that's
I get what you're saying. Yeah, I think that's one thing it's probably the last thing I'll say because this is really juicy and stuff. But I was just really the Enzo Maresca, like I was really worried, not worried about Cole Palmer because I did think he was going to play right centre mid, but what I've seen for a right centre mid in the Leicester team under Maresca was a very strict,
pick it up in the pocket,
very strict pocket role, like something you'd see at Manchester City, late box runs and all that. And I was thinking if you're not allowing Cole Palmer to shift from left to right and get on the ball, take touches, cross from the edge of the...
long passing is such a brilliant quality of his.
His diagonals and like letting him just drift around the park. I was really worried that Maresca was going to come in and kind of favour the system over the quality of the individual. But he's done the polar opposite, and I think the way Maresca's kind of come into the team...
I still think he's shifting towards trying to get that style in play.
Well, I think that's the adaptability we talked about in it, and the first episode where we were like, we're actually quite interested to see what he's doing. This is going to be the juiciest fixture of the weekend. Doesn't even matter on the scoreline because there's going to be that much going on in this game in terms of tactics, in terms of the managers, the players.
Tell us what's going on in the rest of the season almost.
So, watch out for the main juicy tactical preview in a couple of days. But we are going to move swiftly on. I don't want to do that game yet because I don't want to cry. Newcastle United versus Brighton Hove Albion. This is going to be a pretty interesting game, and I wanted to start with saying Newcastle this season have been very underwhelming for me. And I wanted to kind of go into the numbers and tell you a few stats that I think a team like Newcastle, obviously we know about the financial stuff in the summer, they couldn't really sign anyone, stuff like that. But Southampton, Palace, Ipswich, Leicester, Forest, Wolves and Everton are the only teams to accumulate less non-penalty expected goals than Newcastle, which is really poor company to be in, especially for a team of Newcastle's quality. And I think the margin in terms of how far they are from dropping all the way down into like the bottom three isn't far off at all. Newcastle's goalkeeper has been forced to make the joint second most amount of saves in the Premier League this season, and he has overperformed the expected goals against already after 7 games by 3.2.
Wow.
So he's saved them 3 goals in 7 games, but he's also having to make the second most saves in the league, which, again, for a team of Newcastle's quality of where they want to be, is not good enough.
No.
And only Southampton have made more mistakes leading to a shot than Newcastle with 7, and only West Ham have been dispossessed more than Newcastle. So I actually think I wanted to kind of pick your brains on this, and we'll get into Brighton later because there's obviously things that Brighton do now with the high line and the amount of pace that Newcastle have got that could favour them. And I do think it's a massive test for Brighton to go over there and try and play this possession style against St James's Park. You know how it is, you're a City fan, like you know how it gets. But I think Newcastle this season have been just really, really underwhelming. And I wanted to ask you basically the question of the midfield, the kind of the defensive line and the forward line is tailor-made to a bit more of a long ball, not a long ball, but like a mid to long ball style, high pressing, high energy, high intensity. And last season, they got the injuries, they got the Champions League and stuff like that. Do you think, realistically, Newcastle playing this way, where do you think their ceiling is? Because I don't think this team can be a top 4 team at the moment, playing how they're playing. Because did you watch the Everton game? That was almost as boring as Aston Villa and United. And the only difference was that Anthony Gordon missed a penalty. And obviously, if they score the penalty, it's 1-0 and they've got 3 points on the board and it looks a whole lot better. But the pace of the game, what they're doing with the ball, how slow they're just moving, there's not really any ideas in terms of, if they don't have space, Newcastle, which they will have against Brighton, which we'll cover, but like, feel like they're very, very lost of ideas. I feel like Joelinton, Bruno, Tonali, them kind of midfielders, they're not really... I mean, some of them are ball carriers, but they're not players who are going to play like,
break a block
5, 6 passes in behind a game that are just liquid, and they've got forwards coming in, and they've got Harvey Barnes and Gordon playing on the same side. Both of them want to play left, so they have to put one right. I just think it's a bit messy. So what do you think about Newcastle? I've been really underwhelmed by Newcastle. What do you think about them?
I think when we talk about tactics, I always go back to the players. I think when we discuss tactics in general, a lot of people sort of focus strictly on the shape and things, and people are sort of trending towards that as a conversation. But for me, I always look at the players. Are they playing in their optimal zones? Are they balanced in sort of the grand scheme of the team? And then sort of who is able to make a difference in those specific positions? Is the philosophy sort of benefiting the individual players? Now obviously you've got injuries for Newcastle that are hindering some of sort of where their players can play. Anthony Gordon playing down the middle, for example, and he's done that before, but him playing down the middle, I think suits sort of a counter-attacking style. He did it against Manchester City. I thought it was brilliant in that sense. But you almost get that sense of when you do become a team that performs well in your first season, you almost get the benefit of the doubt. Teams don't treat you as one of the best teams, so they almost go toe-to-toe with you a little bit. Then when you are sort of established, look, they're in the Champions League, teams respect Newcastle. Yeah, you have to get those individual players who can break down teams, and teams are going to sort of sit in a little bit more against you because, look, they respect you a little bit more, and that's fine. Now, when you've got Newcastle playing this sort of way, one, I think they're still getting to grips with the fluidity of sort of the rotations between their own players. I think their midfield is good at its best. When you do have a player like Tonali, when you do a player like Bruno Guimaraes, when you have Joe Linton, for example, I think they're all players who can, one, carry the ball brilliantly from deep, but they're not getting situations in which they are able to do that. And two, they can rotate out wide really well. But who's attacking the box in those situations? You don't really
got like the midfield doesn't really have goals. It doesn't really create enough. And I feel like if Isaac doesn't have the season he did last season where he put up loads of non-penalty goals and stuff like that, and if Gordon doesn't have a similar kind of output in terms of the 10 goals, 10 assists that he got last season.
His goals were coming in games against top teams who held the ball.
But his Big Six record was incredible last. I think he actually was the most effective Big Six player last season. So I think in terms of what we're saying, I think Newcastle really needs to kind of define the style and build around it, because I think the one thing they're missing now is people always talked about Kieran Trippier being like their main creator, and which was true, but obviously Kieran Trippier's had a bit of a downward spiral since the Euros. I think he started the season injured. So I think Newcastle are in a really tough position where I think this game, funnily enough, we're criticising them. I think this game is up there with kind of the City game where they played well. This game against the high line of Brighton, an aggressive press, they can play over the press, they can battle in midfield. I think they will. The most common result in this fixture since 2016 is a draw. So I don't think it's out of the realms of possibility that these two teams could draw because of how much XG Newcastle are conceded on a consistent basis. But I also think that suicide high line of Brighton, with the pace that Newcastle have, I think they will catch him. They will catch him out once or twice. I just see it coming.
The dynamics are probably flipped in games that Newcastle have played this season. They've been the team that opposition are giving the onus on having the ball, trying to break them down, and then opposition are actually either from set pieces or from attacking the space that Newcastle are leaving. 1v1 and plays that in the back line, etc. Those situations are leading to the increased shots, for example, against Newcastle. Now, Newcastle, I think this game suits them. I would probably say Newcastle do win. I think Brighton are a brilliant team in how they can try and build out from pressure.
Would you say Newcastle are better against Big Six teams than they are against the rest of the 14 teams?
I think they're more suited to playing how big teams.
So I think when they have to come out and they have to play. I think Brighton kind of fall, not the Big Six, but like I think top 8 teams, I guess we'll say. And obviously Newcastle are included in there. But I think
even Southampton, by the way, Southampton are not a Big Six team, but teams that do try to dominate possession and pen teams in, Newcastle are built to play against those. Now the problem is, can they figure out a solution against stubborn teams? Trippier in his individual brilliance to sort of create solutions is a player who can provide some of that. Now, who else is, creative enough in those situations? Do they have dead ball specialists from set pieces? Do they have, guys who can win a header from a corner? Do they have someone who can play that through pass to find, Barnes running in? Some of their goals have been sort of long shots because it's that individual from Barnes to take that shot from the edge of the box rather than getting in behind. And
I think that's one of we'll move on from this, but I think that's one of the things about Newcastle is when you actually look at the goals this season that they've scored, a lot of them really are a bit not worrying. I don't want to say worrying because I'm not gonna Barclays and stuff like that, long shots and but like scoring long shots consistently is a good thing. They're great to look at. They're great to look at. But like, you need to kind of keep in mind that if it's taking long shots every game, it's like the Wolves game, they scored 2 ridiculous goals from being 1-0 down against Wolves. Yeah. We've all watched Wolves this season, and they're not really that good. So having to go to Molineux and score them 2 goals to get you out of danger, obviously they did it, so it's easy to say, oh, they did it.
So
and
they
it
have
worked.
the player quality to
They have the player quality to do it,
shots,
which is completely fine.
But they have more
it's
solutions.
Worrying. Yeah, because when you play against other teams who maybe have a goalkeeper who's going to save that, or a defender who's going to block it, it becomes a bit more worrying. But it is probably one of the most interesting games in terms of the dynamics of the teams, like the Spurs and West Ham game, to be fair. Moving on to Manchester United versus Brentford. This is a very, very, very important game for Erik ten Hag. I don't want to touch on it too much because he spent 2 episodes now battering Erik ten Hag, and I'm kind of bored of it. Yeah. But there's just
should
a few.
Talk about Thomas Frank then.
I know. Should we talk about Thomas Frank? We actually can, to be fair. Yeah. Brentford have completed the most long passes this season with the 3rd best accuracy of their long passes, and I kind of wanted to touch on the long ball aspect of Brentford in terms of how they play against Manchester United. So Manchester United have got one of the most aggressive high presses. I'm not going to say it's great, but it's very aggressive. So
at the start of the season, by the way, it did look nice.
It did look, with Mount in there. But basically Brentford, what they try to do is they split the centre halves in the box. They put the full-backs high and wide. Well, not high and wide, just wide. And the goalkeeper kind of stands on it, and they let the opposition team press them. And then their aim is to go long, either straight from the goalkeeper, or they pass the ball between the centre halves, they draw on the press, and then they look long. And they're looking for them, as Umir mentioned before, their man-to-man situations in the defence where defenders are going 1v1.
And
Manchester United, on the second ball.
That's Brentford.
Yeah.
A massive strength of their game. And by the way, it's the way they've scored, like, in the first couple minutes.
That's how they've done it. Yeah, they've just crowded the midfield.
Second ball.
And I think Manchester United are one of the few not the few teams, there's a couple other teams that do this, but Manchester United are one of the teams who leave 2v1 versus centre-backs and a striker. So they don't really go man-to-man with the centre-halves because I don't think Erik ten Hag trusts the centre-halves to go 1v1. Yeah. Now, to add to this, I'm basically just giving a full-on tactical preview for this game. Brentford have delivered the most crosses in the box successfully this season. Right. So they've got a long ball aspect, Brentford, where they can go long against a man-to-man system and they can compact on second balls, win it nice and high. That's a problem for Manchester United because the defenders are not good 1v1. So that's the first thing. They've delivered the most crosses successfully into the box. Manchester United play Porto, and if you go and watch that game, Manchester United are shocking at dealing with crosses, especially against a big man. Now, Brentford don't have a big man, but they have Brian Mbeumo, and he's better than a big man. This guy is one of the greatest players in the world. Unbelievable. I love this guy. So I actually think my golden nugget of information is I still think Erik ten Hag. I don't know what the situation is with Maguire, is injured. I don't know when the expectancy thing is. I think he's going to keep Johnny Evans in, and I think Lissandro. I think Lissandro's going to be dropped. Yeah, I think he's going to be Dillit and Evans. Yeah, that's what I think he's going to do, because I think Erik ten Hag will look at this team, the Brentford game. They're a long ball team. They're a crossing team. And even though Manchester United want to have the ball, Brentford have actually done a pretty good job at trying to build out from the back. Yeah. And I think this game, Brentford are going to put Manchester United under a little bit of pressure with the second balls. And again,
that's my biggest worry is Manchester United in their midfield selection have players who, some of them are good on the ball. Yeah. Maine's good on the ball. Eriksen's good on the ball.
Physically.
But screening laterally, screening horizontally. Just the ability to get out when that ball does drop and crowd around.
Yeah. This will be a game where Ugarte plays. He will throw Ugarte into this game, because what will happen is if he plays Eriksen and Mainu together, and that first ball drops in front, it's over.
I have a question for you. What do you think? So like, I always have this debate in terms of like tweaking your system for your opposition, or as a big team, there's an expectation for trying to stamp your style on the game. Now, for example, Ten Hag at Manchester United, three seasons in. By the way, he always adapts. Yeah, but 3 seasons in against Brentford, even if he gets a result, can it be acceptable for him in that situation to set up a team strictly to counter Brentford's weaknesses if they're not trying to establish their dominance on the ball?
I think it's a bloody good question, I'll tell you that. I mean, so you're saying adaptability and
versus
kind of being principles
being dominant in that situation.
I really like managers who do it, because Thomas Frank is a big advocate for it, because I think he said last night on Monday Night Football he goes to a 3 against the bigger teams, and the more possession teams he goes to a 4 against the lesser teams. But I think when the tweaks...
But you can still see, and despite his tweaks there, they still look like...
They still look the same. I think I would rather a team have an identifiable style of play.
Yeah.
So I'd rather a team have a more identifiable style of play rather than having proper pragmatism.
Yeah.
Because I think proper pragmatism is good, but I think you put a ceiling on how high you can go as a team. Right. I think Graham Potter is probably the best example that I can think of in my head about a manager who incorporated different sorts of game plans week on week, who kind of paid the price for it. So Manchester United played Brighton 2 seasons ago. Oh no, Erik ten Hag's first season. Yeah, so 2 seasons ago, Erik ten Hag's first season. I think we got beat 2-1. I can't remember the game fully, but I know one thing for a fact is he played a 3-4-3 diamond against Erik ten Hag, and that was like a brand new shape at the time. He'd never used it before. He went 3-4-3. He overloaded the midfield, and then I come out of that game and I made a video on it, and I was like, Graham Potter has just absolutely outclassed Erik ten Hag in one of his first games. Erik ten Hag must be sat there in his office going, what have I just seen? Like an English manager's just pulled out a 3-4-3 diamond with a team with a seagull on the badge, and I'm getting absolutely battered. He's like, what's going on? Yeah. So he did that, and then he went to Chelsea, and then I thought doing this thing where he jumped from one style to another shape and doing all that, I thought it was really good. But then at Chelsea, when you're playing 3 times a week, you've got Champions League, not anymore, but they got Champions League at the time, it was really worrying that he was never going to build a consistent style where the players were familiar every single day with what they're doing. And that's what I think about United.
Yes, I don't mind when coaches, and by the way, I encourage coaches to come up with novel solutions for the opposition that they're playing. Find their weaknesses, try and get a numerical superiority in certain parts of the pitch, etc. I think the debate happens when a manager of a top team decides not to play in a dominant style of play. So
it's let's say frowned upon.
Yeah. So if you play 3 at the back or 4 at the back and you're Ten Hag, realistically, it's not an issue. But if you concede possession against someone like Brentford or someone like Newcastle, for example, even though technically it's the right thing to do, perhaps, as a team of that stature with the players that you have, those are the sort of games that you should be trying to impart your...
Thomas Tuchel used to get a similar kind of criticism. Yeah. So they beat Manchester City in the Champions League final, and I think they had about 30% of the ball. Yeah. And in reality, the people were looking at that going, yeah, it is Manchester City, but we are Chelsea. Yeah, we are Chelsea. We've got Thomas Tuchel, we've got Kante. Yeah. You've got all these players, but it worked. Yeah.
But if they did that against a Fulham, for example.
They did it against you away. Yeah. I think they beat you 2-1 away.
They just slapped
in lockdown. And I remember watching that game, and they were brilliant. Yeah. But then it's almost like, but if you're winning a title, can you do that? Yeah. If you're winning a title, I think Arsenal, they have the balance. Arsenal have a balance to do both.
But they only, and this is why I think Arteta...
It's only against you, isn't it?
Yeah, it's against like Man City or...
Whereas Chelsea, I think under Tuchel, I think certain managers do it in a 3 or 4 games, whereas Arsenal only adapt for that 1 game.
Yeah, and United, by the way, do it against
everyone.
Yeah, we adapt
random United.
Bottom.
We're going to move on from United, but the adaptability of coaches and stuff. I think it's a really nice niche, good thing to have in your locker.
Yeah, but I think even you can only pull it out. You should try and still be dominant.
Yeah, you can only pull it out in your big fixtures. Yeah. I think Edin Terzic for Dortmund had a really good game plan against who the hell won the Champions League?
Just now.
Yeah. The Real Madrid.
It was Madrid. No,
it had to be Madrid. Who scored?
Carvajal and Vinicius.
Wow.
Vinicius. That's why he's getting...
I don't remember that.
No.
But anyway, Dortmund did basically a similar thing where I thought they played...
We need a cut.
Yeah, we need a cut there, because we just forgot who won the Champions League there, ladies and gentlemen. So, analyst. No, but I think Dortmund did something really similar, in kind of adapting for the big... You're adapting for a big Champions League game. And I think
so no one's going to frown on you.
No one's going to do that. And I think they had a really good tight grip on that game for about 30 minutes. It was a 30-minute spell where it looked like they actually could score, and they were carving Madrid open in behind. Interestingly, we're going to talk about something further down the line, but a team against Liverpool this season have done something similar to what Dortmund did. We'll do a small segment on this one. This is a relegation 6-pointer with the newly promoted teams, which is Southampton versus Leicester City.
Yeah.
It's obviously not a big fancy Big Six team, but we need to keep into mind that this is a very, very important game for both teams. I had Carl Anker on obviously last week, and he used to report for Southampton for The Athletic, and so he still keeps tabs on Southampton games. And Russell Martin keeps saying that we're not judging the games against the bigger and better opposition. We're going to judge it against teams who are more on our quality level. There's not a team in the league who are more on their quality level than Leicester City, even though Leicester City have actually started the season better. The problem is, for Russell Martin, is they didn't play well in this game last season. Across the 2 games in the Championship last season, Southampton lost this fixture 9-1 on aggregate, which is already very worrying going into it. I think they lost 4-1 at home to Leicester, and obviously the teams have changed, managers changed, players have changed.
I think we'd map that onto Chelsea.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. But this is going to be a game where Leicester City are going to have to watch Southampton have 70% of the ball again. Only Spurs have a lesser goal kick average length than Southampton, which is not surprising. Russell Martin has basically persisted with the playing out from the back. But obviously, as we mentioned before, Southampton have had the most mistakes leading to a shot out of anyone in the league. And me and Umir and Carl Anker in the past few weeks have been speaking kind of about the modern style of play and whether or not it's working. And we just spoke about the pragmatism aspect. And we all know, if you watched any game of Southampton last year, they are not going to adapt. And if they do adapt, it's going to be very minimal. Like, we're talking like maybe a 3-back instead of a 4-back to get
but
more.
the philosophy will be the same.
All the principles are the same. And there's only one player who's in the current Southampton squad who's scored against Leicester before, and that's Jan Bednarek, who's a centre-half. So they've got really no experience in scoring against the Foxes. And Jamie Vardy has got 8 goals and 4 assists in 21 games against the Saints, which is it's very worrying for Southampton going into it. And I think Jamie Vardy, Fatawu and Mavadida have got a lot of pace, and Southampton have got a very high line, and it's not stacking up well for Southampton, because if Russell Martin is basically saying that they've got to go and attack the games against the teams who are similar level of opposition, this is going to be a game where they have to impose themselves. There's one player I want to ask you about who's probably been Leicester's player of the season so far, is Buonanotte, who's scored the goal in Fox's first win of the season against Bournemouth at home to win 1-0. It was an absolutely beautiful finish, by the way. Lovely player, lovely goal. Another Brighton Academy player. But just like a scouting one. He now has the joint most direct goal involvements in the league with 4. I want you to try and guess, right, this blew my mind. So there's someone in Leicester's squad with 4 assists, right? The joint most in Leicester's squad. He's got 4 Premier League assists. Try and guess who this is.
God knows. I want to say Harry Winks just because that's my mate.
He plays in midfield, I'll give you that.
Skip. It's not Mavadida.
It's Wilfred Ndidi.
To be fair, Ndidi, the way he pushes up, he plays
high. Do you know when I first seen Maresca, I thought Maresca was a dud, because as soon as he's come into Leicester, he started playing Ndidi as an advanced midfielder, and I was like, what's he doing?
No, I love that.
I was like, what's he doing?
I love when people just move players.
But he's got 4 Premier League assists in 7 games this season, which is...
I knew that from somewhere.
He went from being like Manchester United and City and Chelsea and Liverpool and all them players were looking at him going... we're looking at him going, big bruiser in midfield, big tackler. He used to top all... He was the Polina before Polina. Topped all the tackles and interceptions, ranks, ball recoveries. And now he's got 4 assists in 7 games and he's playing as a 10 or something, and it's like, okay, fair enough.
The thing is, though, that attacking big spaces, he's got a good ball on him, and that attacking big spaces, it's almost, not exactly, but it's almost like the way Everton changed and utilised Decore's position in.
But that's brilliant.
Yeah, 4 assists
I think, honestly, because I think the main thing when everyone was looking at Ndidi was like, is he technical enough? And now he's playing in the pockets, and it's like...
But I almost think there's like a element of like profiling players without actually appreciating what their qualities are. Like you've got a tall player, you've got a player who can put in a tackle. People automatically assume, look, because you're physical, you're not technical. But there's also, he
has good balance. I've actually always quite liked him. I think I was pretty surprised when they went down that him and Maddison both didn't go. I thought he was going to get picked up. I think him being in the Championship was a bit wild. And then obviously he's done what he's done, and massive props to Wilfred indeed. He's kind of proved a lot of people wrong. I mean, I want to go back and look at his assists because I don't know what he's doing with the ball. I didn't check his underlying numbers to see if he's got 4 chances created, 4 goals, and they're all from the outside the box. But
he passes the sort of 5 yards.
He just lays it off. 40, but no, ridiculous. Honestly, really good stuff, to be honest. And Maresca apparently knew something that we didn't. So I don't think anyone would have said that. No. It's a bit crazy. I mean,
people weren't really talking about it, but I've always said, like, especially, by the way, like, I think most footballers, not most, but like a lot of footballers, when they are sort of growing through the academy system or when they're teenagers, they're just the best players in their teams.
Yeah.
They're all strikers.
Yeah.
And then you go into the academy, you got like sort of 20 strikers.
And then you go, right, you're right.
Yeah, like you're taller, you go into sort of holding midfield, etc. So there's always that sort of, I always think there's that malleability in what players can do and where they can play. So
I like lanky midfield, like lanky midfielders who don't play in like the deep areas midfield. Like when Havertz was a 10. Like I used to love watching Havertz as a 10. No, I don't like him anymore in midfield. Don't put him in midfield again. But like just big lads in high areas in midfield, like Pogba and stuff are just great. Moving on to the last game we're going to preview before we get into a little bit of the England fallout, just to ask you a few questions on that. But this is also not going to be one we spend too much time on because it is Wolves against Manchester City. Obviously, it's a bit of an interesting game because Wolves are the last team not to have finished in the top 4 last season to beat Manchester City. So it was Aston Villa, Arsenal and Wolves are the last 3 teams to beat Manchester City. Key all at home. So you're not being beat by anyone. Well, you're not being beat at the Etihad in the Premier League for like 50 games or something.
I love it.
But quite painfully to say, it's probably the worst Premier League team at the moment against the best Premier League team. Obviously, Liverpool are top of the pack. But a bit really tough for Wolves this game. The only thing they've got going for them at the moment is that game last season, which they played really well in. I really like Gary O'Neill as a coach. I think me and you are both kind of on that. I think he's been really unlucky with kind of the financial stuff that's going on and kind of the recruitment that's been. But Wolves last season were the team to beat Manchester City. City had 23 shots in that game, but only accumulated 0.8 expected goals, which is 0.03 xG per shot, which is ridiculously low. So to put it plain, Wolves limited City to virtually no good chances, and that was one of them games where I think Alvarez scored a free kick. I think he scored a free kick in the top left, and I think that wasn't even a chance. Wolves did the thing that people have started doing against Haaland, where they play 3 centre-backs and they just basically put the middle centre-back on Haaland and they use the other 2 defenders to kind of sweep up things in behind and clip onto loose balls. Brentford did that as well. So maybe there is something there where they've got kind of something in the back of the mind as they know how to play against City, you know. This is a pretty funny one, this. So Ederson has played 12 games against Wolves, right, in the Premier League. He's only had to make 6 saves in them 12 games.
A save every 2 games.
A save every 2 games.
It might just be the fact that Wolves keep scoring.
Well, to be fair, Wolves have actually scored against City in recent times. I think Raul Jimenez had like a really good record against Hughes.
By the way, this is why the Fulham game, like I was shook about the Fulham game, was because Jimenez and Adama, whenever they played against us,
the Wolves duo. No wonder Fulham caused you so many problems.
Exactly.
That makes so much
the
sense.
2 Wolves guys,
That makes so. I never actually clocked that.
Yeah, literally, I saw Adama there. I saw Raul Jimenez there. I said,
I never clocked that. You know, it's the 2 Wolves boys. And I remember that game in lockdown where Adama played right wing back, and he just
he cooked us he cooked us every time.
Yeah, but. We're not going to speak about it because actually thinking about Adama Traore missing them chances really does get me angry.
Because she'd be flipping top 5 all time.
I know, but it's the worst defence against the best attack. Wolves have conceded 21 goals this season, which is 3 a game, which is really not good. And Manchester City, I think, have scored 18 or 19 goals, somewhere around. I think 18.
Look,
I can't really say much. I can't really say much. On paper, it's a worrying sign for Wolves. I do think they will level out and have a bit of form, but there's not really much to say on that game, except from good luck Wolves, I guess.
Yeah.
But
give me a Phil Foden scream edge of the box.
Yeah, it's going to take that. It's going to be 0-0, 90 minutes. It's going to be Foden on the edge.
There, you know what I mean?
Moving quickly on to England, we are going to cover them. Obviously, we don't want to spend too much time on this because the international football has been quite dull for England. Obviously, they beat Finland 3-1, but again, it wasn't really too convincing. It was an improvement on the Greece game. But there are a few topics that we want to cover. Obviously, Lee Carsley in interview post-match of the Greece game, said he wants to go back to under-21s football, but he basically can't wait for it.
But then in the interview,
he said
after this game, he goes, like kind of if they want me, like I'm there.
Yeah, if they want me, I'm there. But I think he's also said after the Finland game that the England job should go to someone who's good at winning trophies.
Yeah.
And he's not won a trophy. He's won trophies. He's won a bloody under-21s Euros.
But someone brought that quote back to him and said, "Does that rule you out?" And he goes, "No."
No.
So then I was thinking.
So he said that basically he's on the way to winning trophies, or on the way to winning multiple trophies, and that's the difference between him and the top coaches.
Yeah.
So the question, obviously, I don't think Lee Carsley is going to take the England job. I think he is an under-21s manager. I think he wanted to give a few nice days out to the players who had helped him in the under-21s Euros, which is completely fine. He's not left England in a bad spot. Like, let's be honest, his
philosophy in general is to platform his players. Like, it's very player focused. And
it doesn't look like Lee Carsley is going to take the hot seat. And the current names that people are reading out are basically Eddie Howe, Graham Potter, Thomas Tuchel, or maybe even Pep Guardiola.
Yeah.
I think I wanted to ask you. I'll give mine before. But who does everyone want to be their England manager come the next major international tournament? Selfishly, I'm not going to say Thomas Tuchel because I want him at United. But I think for me, I've seen quite a lot of people kind of link Eddie Howe to the job because of the FA stuff and the links. And I think Graham Potter should be England manager, and I'm pretty confident in saying that.
Yeah.
And the reasons being basically behind why I think Graham Potter should be the England manager if he does want it is we all know that the best things that Gareth Southgate did was to make the camp enjoyable. Yeah. And Graham Potter, if you don't know, has a really good history in human relations. He's got loads of degrees, masters in terms of people, psychology, sports psychology. So in that area of the job, I think he's got that. But then also we spoke before about the pragmatism, the adaptable things from game to game, tournament football, one-off football.
Yeah.
I think he's got that kind of edge to his philosophy, which makes him come up with certain solutions for certain games, where if we play Spain in the final, he's got something different from the game against Holland.
And he also does have the individual quality too.
Yeah.
He doesn't need to coach.
And that's the thing. The Brighton games the Brighton stint was always underperforming the expected goals.
Yeah.
And everyone looked at that and went, well, it's not so much a coaching problem, it's so much that he doesn't have the individual quality. Yeah. In England, in the England job, he will have an abundance of it. I think he's a better fit for England than Eddie Howe. And the reason why I will say that is because I think Eddie Howe's philosophy, even though he used different sort of style at Bournemouth, and I think he's trying to do something now at Newcastle, but I think Eddie Howe's style is too focused on physicality. And I think it's too focused on pressing as a playmaker. I think it's too intense to the point where if you come to international football, I don't think pressing teams who press on the level of a Newcastle would fare well in international football.
It's hard to coach a really nice pressing short amount of time,
especially from game to game.
Yeah,
especially from game to game. I think if you look at Spain, Spain had the right balance. They weren't too possession. I just think it should be Graham Potter. I'm going to ask you who you think now. Obviously, you can throw a name out there that I've not said who's available, but I just think, in my personal opinion, I think he would bring attractive football as well.
Yeah,
I think Eddie Howe would. I think he'd bring exciting football. But who do you think should be the England manager? You can stick with Lee, obviously, if you want, but...
By the way, I love Lee Carsley.
He's a great guy. He's a great guy.
As a personality, maybe like he doesn't...
He doesn't give the media all the stuff, but he is a good guy,
But his the 21s teams, like, I absolutely love them. For me, I would go Thomas Tuchel. For some of the similar reasons that you mentioned.
Tournament football.
Tournament football, the ability to... I think what Southgate did well was, and people didn't really like this aspect of his game, but what he did really well was set up in a pragmatic style without the ball to get through those difficult knockout games. Tuchel's shown that, wherever he's gone, he's shown the ability to set up a really strong defensive system. And England have, numerous players who are individually brilliant in their defensive ability. On top of that, the way Tuchel was at PSG, he gave his team that sort of foundation for his top talents to go and express themselves. Neymar's, Mbappe's, Dembele's, etc. Now you've got a team who have all of that.
Similar level of...
brilliant quality in attack. So they've got the ability to try and win you the games. In a sense, he's similar, people won't get onto me for this. He's similar in his tournament approach to Southgate, and we've had a lot of success with Southgate. But I think what he does better is the in-game tweaks, the way he reads the game. I think he's brilliant in terms of actually changing something in the middle of the game, whether that's a substitution, whether that's a shape. And then on top of that, some of Tuchel's struggles in the past have come with either transfer situations or with the board.
That's a good point. Yeah,
but now you've just got
the FA.
You know, you've got the FA, and you've got just access to every English player in the world.
It's a really good point, actually, because I think that's kind of been his demise at most clubs, and I think that's one of the major red flags that people have about him coming to Manchester United.
Exactly.
Is the power over the transfers, the power in saying the club. But obviously, at the England job, there won't be anything to argue about.
It's literally just
that's a really good point. I think what would you make of a German manager in England? Do you see anything do you see that? I don't know whether or not I do. Like I don't know whether or not I'm particularly.
I would say if
we play Germany in an international, would it feel weird having? Do you know what I mean?
I think because he's managed in the Premier League, like I feel like there's an appreciation.
It's almost like a Pep, where it's like you think if he manages England, it's fine.
Yeah,
one of them.
I know a lot of people kind of feel weird about it.
I do understand it. I do understand it.
So do I. Yeah,
I do understand it because, like, obviously, you want to celebrate 11 English players and like English manager, English coaching staff, but. No, I understand.
I think ultimately it's a job at the end of the day, and you're just trying to get the best players in. Because then where do you start with the line? Do you need an English video analyst? Or?
That's a good point. Because there'll be some staff in there who are English.
Sure.
No goals and assists in the last 16 appearances for Phil Foden in an England shirt. What do you think? What do you think is basically going wrong? What do you put it down to? Bad luck, hey, skip.
No. Do you know what I mean?
XG's high. He's not finishing his chances.
I think there's probably two parts to it. First thing is, I think there's a little bit. So I think the criticism and the discourse around Foden is different in two camps. When you talk or listen to pros and coaches, in his England performances, they'll still highlight the fact that he's played good at times. They'll say, look, his Euros performance. I thought in the Euros, by the way, that there were some games where in his actual performance, he was decent. He didn't contribute to the final actions. He hit the post a couple of times. He was getting in good areas. It was an offside goal, for example, things like that. So in those situations, I thought his performances were decent. On top of that, I think if you're generally speaking about why he's not, making that step up, I think he plays at a pace that's too quick almost for this England side, and he doesn't shoulder the responsibility like he can. So what I mean by the first point is he'll receive the ball, he'll turn, and he'll pass it quickly, or he'll receive the ball and pass it back on a first touch. Now, at Manchester City, when you're doing that, you've got players who are willing to play back at that speed or look for Foden in those small pockets. One, I think there's not I'm not saying his teammates don't trust him, but to play a pass into a very narrow pocket
and to trust the player in the pocket to get it.
Because ultimately, on a big stage, if you're a midfielder, you make that pass, it doesn't come off, the other team attack you in a very direct fashion, you concede. You don't necessarily want to be making mistakes at that level on that stage. So partly, I think it's the fact that teams are a bit regressive and pragmatic in how they do play. I think if you get a Wharton in there who's very
snappy on the ball,
very snappy, puts passes through the lines, and you encourage Foden to say, "Look, I'm the man. Look, take touches. Don't just play super quick." Palmer, we've seen being brilliant for England, and he's taken extra touches. He's almost taken shots from distance. And Foden, by the way, when he did start taking shots from distance in the Euros, I think he hit the post. He was making things happen. But Foden needs to shoulder a bit more responsibility. He needs to play slightly at a slow pace, and I think he needs to almost start dropping deep,
getting on the ball.
Yeah, getting on the ball, and maybe it takes a coach to kind of demand that of him. But it's a pacing issue for me, and it's also like a responsibility issue, probably.
And then one more point for the England thing. I'm not gonna go on about this because we've spoke about this. I think we've both made pieces on this.
Yeah. Can
Palmer, Jude, Foden, Saka all play on the same pitch? And I think I'll start because I said this last year.
Yeah.
No.
I feel like I'm a mad scientist. So
do you feel like you could construct something? Because one thing I played around with last year was doing exactly what Lee Carsley did in terms of playing Trent at left back. Because I think if you played Trent at left back, you could play a 4-3-3, and then you can have your 2 split 8s, whether it's Cole Palmer, Foden, Jude Bellingham, Foden, whatever. Yeah. And then Bukayo Saka on the right, and then on the left you could play Cole Palmer. So I kind of played around with them. Things, and then I seen it last night, and I was like, no. I
would tweak it a little bit. And by the way, I don't think this is the best way to use England. Could it work is different from should they do it, and is it the best team? I don't think it's the best 11, and I don't think it is the best way England can utilise their team. If we are thinking about a possible solution that looks somewhat workable, Phil Foden, when you've got Jude in the team, I don't think Jude should be playing pivot.
Do you see him as a final third player?
I would say out of possession, he can defend in central midfield well. Yeah.
But on the ball,
in possession, I want him sort of number 8.
I remember Leah's got cooked on Twitter for saying it was a final third player.
Yeah, he did.
But he was.
But I believe that what the quality that we've seen. I don't think he's a striker either. But I think
but he's like a Lampard. Not a Lampard. It sounds so easy to compare him to Lampard. But I mean, in terms of the way he arrives in the spaces in the box, he's got a knack for scoring goals.
Yeah, almost.
And I think he's powerful on a carry, and you want that.
Gundogan-ish.
Still. Yeah.
But not like, if you take away Gundogan's like build-up quality. But like if I'm just going to go off of a possible solution, I think Foden, when he's played deeper for England or for Manchester City, he's shown good quality.
So you'd play him?
I wouldn't say. I don't think this is the best solution. But if I'm going to think of one solution, I would say, look, you could put Foden next to Rice. You could put Jude in sort of 10, number 10 position. So then your midfield 3 out of position is Foden, Rice, Jude. But Jude's actually the one who pushes on. Palmer has played left wing and shown quality left wing. Saka's played right wing. Put Kane up top.
Yeah, so it's quite similar to mine.
Yeah, but I wouldn't put the 2 8s in there.
Yeah, and also we are going to wrap up in literally 1 minute. I just wanted to throw this out there. One thing, because we both feel this way. I think the fact that Trent Alexander-Arnold can't play right back for his country but can be the best right back in the world playing for Liverpool is absolutely ridiculous. I don't get the science experiment which is going on with Trent Alexander-Arnold. Kyle Walker has been a great servant for England and Manchester City, but there's a clear physical and technical decline in terms of what he's capable of doing right now for England. There was one moment against Finland where he lost the ball and he just tried to run back, and he didn't even have the kind of pace that we're used to seeing a Kyle Walker. Trent Alexander-Arnold is the best right back in the world. He wears an England shirt. Play him at right back. I absolutely, honestly.
And then accommodate your rest.
Yeah, just figure out the rest in terms of your right centre half, your left centre half, and your left back. He is the best defender in terms of dropping him in.
He's not horrendous at defending. Just get a right centre back who can cover the channels.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Put Trent in there.
Yeah. I feel like we're accommodating for like a Kyle Walker or a John Stones or even a Levi Colwill or someone like that.
I think Stones can cover out wide anyway.
Yeah, I don't know. I just always found it bewildering that Trent Alexander-Arnold can't play. Do you know what it is? It's all because of Kylian Mbappe. Kylian Mbappe has made it so that Trent Alexander-Arnold can't play right back for his country, because every single time someone says it, they go, "You got to think about him against France, though, haven't you?" We've played France like once, by the way. Once.
And by the way,
And Walker did great against him, so that's why everyone keeps Walker around, because they're like, oh, if you come up against like a Vinicius Junior or a Mbappe, he's got him there. And I'm just thinking, that's fine, but we have to get to France first, you know. Like we have to beat the teams like your Slovenias and get to France before we actually think about. And it just winds me up, ladies and gentlemen. I
hear you, man. I hear you.
Yeah, he has to play right back. He's not one of England's
issues.
Yeah, he's not
one of Palmer or Trent for their ability to play long passes.
He's not one of the best. He's not one of the best right backs in the Premier League or in the world. He's one of the best players in the Premier League. Like
in the world.
He's like in terms of what he does, he's freakish. I understand the defensive concerns, but we need to make sure we realise that not everyone's got Mbappe.
Is that not playing De Bruyne because he's not tracking back as much?
Yeah, it's just anyway. Thank you for watching the latest episode of the Overlap Breakdown podcast. Please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe and follow us on all podcast streaming platforms, and join us in the next couple of days because we'll be releasing a tactical preview special on Chelsea and Liverpool that is being played on Sunday at 4:30, where we're going to talk about all the key tactical battles, individual players and the statistics behind the fixture. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll catch you next week.